All right, perfect. So everybody, today my guest is Jacobo Koenig, and Jacobo is the founder of Binary Mango, and also a chief technical officer over there. He's basically it's a mobile app development agency that works with innovative founders to solve some of their most interesting problems. So he can also partner with established companies, and they are based in London, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome, Jacobo. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe you can talk about the company first. So how did you get into the whole kind of agency business? Because usually how this goes is that you are a programmer, then you start freelancing, then you need more people and you start an agency. How did you get into that?
Um, so that's a tiny part of the story, but the much longer story is actually I wasn't a programmer before. I went
Mm-hmm.
to college for business, and I used to work in a family company that used to sell decoration products or construction products, in this case, finishes. And
Mm-hmm.
I was the guy that managed natural stone for the company in all of the countries that it operates. So totally unrelated to what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite feel at home at that job. I saw myself, even if I became the best at what I did, I didn't see myself happy. So I started to look for different things to do and try to get away from that industry. And it turns out, very irresponsibly so, that I um, started teaching myself programming on the commute to the office. So there was a lot of traffic, so I wasn't driving and
Mm-hmm.
and watching videos, but I was sort of overhearing them on the way there. In that way, I taught myself programming. And what happened then is I started creating a few projects, and it turned out that people actually appreciated the experience that I had from outside of the programming world as an asset and not really as a liability. So that sort of gave my company a little bit of credibility. I ended up establishing. I hired a few people in terms of helping me produce things that I wasn't in the capacity of doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily enough, because I also had worked in marketing before that, had the opportunity to connect with really interesting brands. So I had a few projects that I did with Duracell and Fossil
Mm-hmm.
and different other brands, especially for Latin America. Um, and you wouldn't think that they would work with a small company, something that is quite recent and essentially created by a nobody, but they were actually quite happy about the fact that we were small and flexible, and they trusted us, and we did a few projects with them, went successful, so we started growing a little bit, and long story short, here we are.
Mm-hmm. And so when did the agency form? What year?
So that was end of 2015, beginning of 2016.
And how many people do you employ? I know you probably have some contractors or freelancers, but how big is like the core team of the
Yeah,
company?
so within the core team, we have a senior in each one of the categories that we work in. So a web developer, Android and iOS people, and then we subcontract a lot of the time, which I found works fantastic with developers. They want to work remote, number one. Also, they want to manage their own time. So when
Mm-hmm.
people get hired by project, they're more incentivized to do it fast and get another project if that's what they want, or just do it fast and go on vacation if that's what they want as well.
Mm-hmm. And you're based in London, but are you from London or how did you get end up in
No,
London?
no, I'm actually from Venezuela,
Yeah.
in Latin America. I've moved 12 different times in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a whole nother story. But so so Venezuela, as you know, or you might know, that it's a
Mm-hmm.
country in crisis. So a lot of people migrated from Venezuela to different places, and I spent a long time trying to find my place. I lived in Miami for quite a while. um, didn't quite work out with the visa situation. But when I got married, turns out me and my wife come from a European family, so we had the opportunity of coming to England. That
Mm-hmm.
was a year and a half ago, and yeah, that's essentially the last time I moved. We came here. We felt welcomed by the European community and by the UK, so we decided to stay here, and so far we're happy here.
Got it. So does that mean that most of your clients are from Latin America or Venezuela, or are they from the UK? How does that work?
Yeah, no, not at all. We're quite an international company. There's two words that describe my sales process, which is relationship and referrals. Um, in terms of that, we pretty much get clients from wherever they come. I have a big network of people that I've met and became friends with in all over the world, and usually, more often than not, because it's high ticket items when it comes to development, most of the clients sort of have that prerequisite of trusting the people that they work with. So that can be from say my cousin in Miami who introduced me to this wonderful person that's doing this app that's doing
Mm.
X or Y, or it can be that somebody that I met in Panama while I was there, and have over for dinner a few times, became friends, and a few years later wanted to do something. So I have clients at the moment in Miami. I have clients in Belgium. I have
Mm.
clients in the UK. In fact, Venezuela, it's probably the place where I have the least clients. Probably
Yeah.
something to do with the situation there.
I guess
Hmm.
that's true. So, but you're not positioned as like an offshoring agency. Like if I go to your website, see your case studies, it's not like you're doing like, hey, we're the offshore development, right? So, are you kind of positioned in a way where you try to build like products for companies and not just do the development stuff, which you can't even compete on pricing wise with, let's say, Ukraine or something like that. So, how are you doing that challenge, like positioning your agency in a way that it kind of stands out today, where there's thousands in agencies in London, in Prague, where I am? How do you compete with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It touches upon one of our greatest advantages and also one of our greatest challenges. Like you said, there's tons of agencies. I get 2 messages a day from somebody that contacted me on LinkedIn, and they have the cheapest, more effective
Mm.
programmers in the world. They're in Ukraine or they're in Latin America, wherever they are. Buy from us and not from anybody else, and that's a lot of noise, and that makes it really, really hard for an agency that has a bit more of a local approach to differentiate themselves. But that's ultimately what we are. I've always thought that the USP that Binary Mango has is the fact that we think of our projects more as users than as developers, and having it be the case that a lot of us come from the marketing world or from some sort of business environment, then we sort of try to understand the project in a more holistic way. And I feel when I meet with my prospective clients, they get that, and they see, so this is not a group of programmers that I need to cut the meat for and give them piecemeal, but they can understand the project and they can recommend to me what the best approach is. In fact, if you see our
Mm.
reviews, for example, in Clutch or in LinkedIn, you'll see most of our clients will say exactly that. So these are people that are not really looking to develop and that's it, whatever I requested, but these are people that are looking to even be contrarian to me and tell me what I'm doing wrong and how to do it better. Um, so that's again the USP, but at the same time it's the challenge because we're not the cheapest. We're not offshoring, although we do hire abroad. We
Mm.
we are positioned as a local company, and officially speaking, we sell in London. We're not actively looking for customers outside of London because this is where our account management and sales team is. And so basically, that's our approach. Is not buy from us because Venezuela is in crisis and you can pay them $1 a month and they'll do wonderful things for you. That's not the approach at all.
Yeah. So for that to think as a user, you really need like experienced UX designers on the team and product guys who can
Yeah.
think through the product before it starts to be developed and like really like have a different mindset. So is your team, you've mentioned iOS, web, Android, but you have like a full cycle product team available for from the design perspective to back end, front end, all the good stuff?
Yeah, it's a hassle-free approach to development. So we don't only have developers, we have designers. We have the best designers. I'm particularly proud of that aspect of my work.
Mm.
Um, we also outsource a little bit depending on the amount of work that we have at any given point in time. But it's always to the same people, and we give them enough work that they're pretty much full time.
Mm.
And yeah, they as much as we have a say on it, we try to do design as well, because we know that's going to make a difference.
Yeah. I have a marketing agency. We work with a couple of software companies but they were just focused on backend development, which is so hard to sell because it's
Yeah.
essentially like the last thing that you do, because like it's like if you don't have a design resource, there's no way you can sell anything. There's no way you can sketch out anything to a client, because you're just doing like the last piece of the puzzle, and then you just
Yeah.
compete on price. It's a bunch of these companies in Poland. It's very hard to offer these services, because you need to the right timing. It's impossible.
Yeah, in
So
that case, you're probably selling to programmers, right?
yeah, exactly.
Because only a programmer will understand backend. In fact, that's probably material for a whole nother podcast that would take a long time in discussion. But we actually don't do backend at all. But it's not that we outsource backend. We
Hmm.
use backends as a service, which ties down to what I told you before about us thinking in more on behalf of the client and the user. And
Hmm.
what's more practical for a startup is essentially to what are they trying to optimize for? Budget and time. If you use a tool like Firebase, for example, then
Hmm.
you're essentially not having to create two separate teams to tackle one specific functionality, but you can scale as much as you want and pivot as much as you want by simply being practical.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Got it. Do you use any cross-platform development, like React Native or some stuff like that, where the
Yeah,
client doesn't have the budget to do native stuff?
yeah, that's a great question. I just had a conversation right a few minutes ago with somebody about that. I've always been very much against hybrid technologies. The reason being,
Hmm.
in my point of view, from the technologies that are available up until recently, you had, for example, Ionic, which Ionic
Ionic,
is
yeah.
recognizable by how crappy it is. Don't really quote me on that, but basically every time that I see an Ionic app, without anybody telling me that that's what it is, I can almost always pinpoint and say, "Your guys did that in Ionic, and
Hmm.
this is why." And it's usually some performance issues, some lags, some different things. And with React Native is a similar approach. It's much more performant, but in both cases is web technology applied to mobile.
Hmm.
um, Taking into account the fact that most developers come from web, it makes sense that you'd make a web-like technology but apply it to mobile. However, I am probably the only entrepreneur in the world and the only agency in the world that will tell you that, objectively speaking, mobile development is easier than web development. It involves way less overhead. So if you want to do web, you need to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript,
Hmm.
and you need to know about a framework, let's say React. Whereas if you wanted to do a mobile application in iOS, for example, you only need to know Swift, and then obviously get a little bit of knowledge on the
Objective
storyboard.
C, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, Objective C, whatever. Now, that's up until recently. What I found is, again, the projects that I did natively, even if I did it separately, one at a time, it took me less time than to recreate something with the same amount of quality in React Native or Ion. That
Hmm.
all is changing, in my opinion, with the advent of Flutter,
Yeah.
which is a technology that I'm really, really putting myself behind. And we just finished our first Flutter project. It came out really, really good.
Hmm.
You cannot notice the difference between that and a native app for the most part. And it really is faster. It really is faster, which is something I cannot say for Ionic or React Native if you're trying to get to the same quality than a native app.
Hmm. Yeah, we're experiencing with that now, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
But are your clients mostly like startups building MVPs, or even product market fit companies who are scaling up, or large corporates doing digital transformation stuff? Who's kind of your typical customer?
So actually, we have two main clients. One is the startup that already has gone through some sort of round, which is either family and friends, and they were able to raise anywhere between 50 to 100K,
Hmm.
something like that, and they want to start something with that, or small seed investment, so on and so forth. And then there's the corporates, like I mentioned at the beginning of this chat. So Duracell, Fossil, all of these people usually they they have a challenge with entrepreneurship, with trying to innovate within their own structures, and
Hmm.
we've come before and helped them optimize processes in almost every area, in human resources, in sales, in marketing. Actually, we've done marketing campaigns with the
Hmm.
help of technology that come out really, really amazingly. Trade marketing, how to control the processes in retail better, so on and so forth. E-commerces. So there's a huge opportunity there, and we've essentially been doing that from the beginning. Startup is sort of like an overshoot of that, where the capabilities are there, so we can get into that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, we do also work with like corporates. It's just a pain in the ass to get a deal or something because of the tendering process and like the RFPs. This is much bigger problem than working with a startup or scale up with a couple hundred people. They can decide very quickly. So we
you,
prefer those guys as well, but
you know what?
it really
I tend
depends,
to
I guess.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, because when I used to work in marketing, that was the case, because it's very hard to differentiate one marketing agency from another. What I felt is, for example, when we came into some of the companies that we came into, because we came with such a unique technology, in our case, augmented reality
Hmm.
at the time, and there was simply not any other provider that could do what we were proposing to do. All the processes were cut down, and companies will do that as long as they understand that you bring enough value that they definitely want to work with you, and they don't want
Hmm.
to put you through the hassle. Otherwise, obviously there's no value for you, and you're going to move elsewhere.
Yeah, that's true for the HQ, but if you work for like a sister company, they still have to get approval. And because we're in different
Yeah,
countries, most HQ is in London, so it's a bit
yeah.
different. But I guess yeah, that's true. So you
No, yeah.
mentioned you're selling in London because you can obviously charge more their premium kind of clients. But so what about the sales team? You said that there's some sort of sales team. How big is that, or how does that look like?
So I'm very much involved in the sales process myself, like I said before, and I have another person that is also tackling a lot of the conversations, and lead generation,
Yeah.
which for us involves uh, a lot of attending events, a lot of joining different clubs, where we know that our target audience is. And like I said, the biggest one for us is referral strategy. So what we do different in that aspect is we have a systematized approach to that. We keep track of the people that can get us referrals the same way that we would keep track of our final clients,
Hmm.
potentially. And um, and we're often calling them to have a chat with them, honestly, just catch up, have a little bit of fun with them, see what they're doing with their own things, and then hopefully get a few ideas around of what would be useful for us, what would be useful for them, and
Hmm.
sort of interchange those contacts. So that's something that I don't have to do myself all the time. That's something that's a bit more systematized. When it comes um, to scoping an idea or scoping a project, it usually involves me a lot, and that's unfortunately something
Hmm.
that's necessary, but that I'm trying to get rid of as much as possible. But yeah, it's hard to scope a project, or delegate the scoping of a project if I'm not there myself,
Yeah.
and hopefully that's something that we'll get better at soon enough.
Got it. Do you have any other channels that you use except the events and the referral strategy? Do you have anything else going for you, such as content marketing or perhaps doing outbound, maybe direct messaging, the CTOs, or anything else you're trying out?
Yeah, so content marketing is a good one. It absolutely works. Seth Godin says that's the only marketing that's left. I absolutely support that statement. The issue personally that I have with content marketing is that, again, there's so much noise out there. There's so many influencers, quote unquote influencers, that are telling you the right way to do things, and it's very hard, even for an authentic voice, to cut across all the bullshit and give an authentic message. So what we've started to do, and we've been getting better this year at, we're starting this year at on, is creating content that's actual knowledge, so hard skills. So basically we create a white paper, for example, for
Mm-hmm.
non-tech entrepreneurs that want to develop an app and want to hire directly, which we definitely don't recommend, but a lot of people have to do it because they have to bootstrap their way into existence. So fine, here's a very basic common sense approach to setting up a Trello and hiring a few people and organizing, the type of reporting that they need to do, having a few tips around of maybe having design before you start developing, the concept of user stories, what you should have before giving any instructions to developers,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that developers are developers and are not designers, for example, things like that. So that's hard content. We try to put that out there. Also, we're gonna start doing videos in different subjects. For example, we spoke about one of the ones that we're interested, hybrid versus native, and it's gonna be a lot like what we spoke about. And this is a question that a lot of entrepreneurs have, or at the very least, they don't know that they don't know. So when I say very clearly, Ionic, in my point of view, sucks, that rings a bell with people that actually sees that content and say, hey, somebody quoted Ionic to me for 5K, and I was wondering why it was so cheap. Oh, okay, so this clicks, and that
Mm-hmm.
hopefully will prompt, maybe not at that stage, but later on in the road when they do have a little bit of budget and so on, hopefully to talk to us. So yeah, content marketing is huge. It just has to be done the right way, and my belief is that the only way nowadays is to do it authentically, cut the bullshit, and say what you really think about subjects. Uh, be confident of speaking about your flaws, about the things that you get wrong that some other people can learn about, and so on and so forth. And maybe include some of the subjects that are touching for people.
Mm-hmm.
And that are real to you. So in my case, we spoke about it a little bit before the interview, is depression, for example. So when I was working on that job that I mentioned before, I was actually going through a clinical depression, something that for people that relate to that subject, they know that essentially you cannot even stand up to brush your teeth. That's too much work. And it turned out to be that programming was the thing that I could stand up to do, regardless of how I was feeling. So even if I got home tired after 11 hours of work, uh, I could
Mm-hmm.
just sit down and do coding exercises, for example. I used to love that, do it all the time, regardless of how happy or depressed I was at that specific time. And yeah, those things are hugely powerful in content, because if people see that you put yourself in a vulnerable position, they'll trust you implicitly, right? Like, this guy has nothing to fear, is not trying to um, present himself as an all-powerful being. It's not trying to bullshit me into thinking that he's something that he's not. He's being authentic. He's being vulnerable. This is a guy that I feel comfortable asking him about my vulnerability, which is I don't know shit about programming. Excuse my language.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So how did you come back from like that state of depression? Did you start programming and that helped you? And then leaving the job was the trigger for you, or?
Well, leaving something is never. I tell we have a small group of people that we help each other a little bit on that, and I always tell them, leaving something is no cure for depression. Doing something or joining something might be. Okay, so it wasn't about leaving my previous job. It was more about joining an experience that gave me the feeling of hope, of that there might be something in the future that might be better in my life. And just to be very, very clear, I rejected medication and pills for about 3 years of doctors recommending that I should take some.
Mm-hmm.
And after 3 years, I said, okay, this is something that I cannot deal with alone. And I started taking them, and that was an absolute lifesaver for me. um, and getting out the taboo of medication in terms of mental health and all of the things that sort of make all of us a little bit wary of getting help from pharmaceuticals or anything like that. If we take that out, some people do need it, and just to be very, very clear, it's not like I found the magical solution and suddenly programming is the thing that's going to change my life and I'm happy now. Not really. I had a lot of help from that. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's what ultimately in tandem with having a better experience in life and having a better life sort of took me out of depression.
But what caused it? Do you remember? Was there one thing, or was this like? Uh,
No, and I believe that for most people, it's not something that causes it. I was just, here's what I think, and this is a very personal opinion. Take it with a lot of salt if you're listening to this. I think that people that have some sort of addiction, and I'll include depression in that. I think those are people that are a little bit more thoughtful in terms of life. They project themselves a lot more into the future. They're a lot more unhappy with the status quo. They don't want to be your average Joe. They have a lot of expectations from life. They want to get the best for life. When they clash against the reality that it's not easy, and that they might as well not even get to the point where they ambition themselves, they can get into these sort of things. And I believe that people with depression, people with addiction, are the searchers, are the lookers, are the scouts, and I value a lot these people, because I know what's going inside is that you're laying down in bed, you don't want to do anything at all during your day, but at the same time, I know what's in your head. In your head, it's a beautiful idea of what life should be, and it's about being better and creating a better world. And that's essentially what I feel it was for me. It was not really something that happened. I mean, life happened, a lot of things happened to a lot of people. In my case, it just resulted in a depression. It might have to do a lot with just my internal chemistry, I guess. Fortunately, my life changed a little bit, and I'm not
mhm.
depending on pills at the moment or medication at the moment. So it makes me think that maybe it's not entirely chemical, but at the same time, it's not like one thing that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very similar to me. When I was 25, I had this 9 month kind of period where I was really, really down. I couldn't get out of bed and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Sounds very similar. And it was because of, I don't know if it was related to the job. There was nothing like triggering this. It just happened one day. I don't know why. But yeah, so it's funny, and it took me like 9 months to get out of it. They were scanning like my brain in hospitals. Nothing, like everything's good. I'm like, okay, but I don't feel like good. Like my head is hurting. It's like terrible feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it's like just like that realization, because I just graduated. I think maybe was like the second year on the job market. I was doing sales, I think, and I was like burned out. So maybe that was the thing. I don't know. But then I had to,
Maybe it's sales. I was in sales as well.
yeah, and then I had to quit and start my own company, which was
Mhm.
even worse because I got into debt. But I got out of that, but it wasn't easy as well. And now there's a second run, because I have two agencies now, so it's kind of
Wow.
crazy. But I think like what helped me, like I started boxing, and that's really
Ah,
the most amazing thing I've ever done. I really love it. It's like the second passion of mine. So like
amazing. Mine is
boxing.
running. That's my drug.
Yeah, I do races every week. I run as well. It's
Ah,
just it's kind of isolated, and I needed people around me to, in like a team, to do something physical, um, because running wasn't enough for me. So boxing was really perfect because you get physical contact and you can't think of anything else during that 2 hour training. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I recommend it if you're like if you want to improve your physique and like get in shape and like start eating healthy, and it takes your mind off work quite
yeah,
well.
absolutely. Absolutely. Mine was running. It came out of a book. I absolutely recommend it. It's called Born to Run. It's about ultra marathons, so people that
Hmm.
run 100K, 100 miles above.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you know David Goggins?
No, that's not
He,
familiar.
he runs these like 200-mile marathons in like deserts. He's like crazy every week, and he has a ton of like podcasts and stuff like that about that.
Oh, amazing.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean that's the struggle. I think a ton of people feel it, especially us founders or like people who are in business, kind of ambitious. But then you
Yeah,
look
it's
around and you can't even pay the rent sometimes. I'm like, shit, but I have this ambition, right? So it's
yeah.
like, how can I
Yeah,
balance
I
those?
don't wanna. I don't wanna get employed. I don't wanna be building other people's dreams and so on. Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of bad advice out there. I'm actually my next article that I'm working on is I don't know what number it is. I'm gonna figure out
Mm.
how many do I have, but X aphorisms that I think are wrong. So sayings, public sayings that I think are wrong. So things like winners never quit. That's terrible advice. Terrible advice, especially if you
Yeah.
work with startups. You need to know when to quit. And sometimes the people that don't quit are the people that get stuck on a 9 to 5 of something that's not working,
Yeah.
or yeah, and the world is full of this terrible advice, honestly, and people don't um sort of don't know how to fit themselves into this advice, and where it has its place and where it doesn't have a place.
Yeah.
Like, client is always right. Not true. But don't tell my
Yeah.
client.
No, I agree. I think you can get stuck even in business. Like I had for 3 years, I was feeling like burned out from running the agency. Just like, what is this? This is like terrible.
Yeah,
I wasn't happy. And then last 2 months ago, I still have it, but I'm employed kind of in a way, or chief business development doing, but I'm feeling much more alive. But I have a ton of freedom. It's not your typical job that you would find, but it's
yeah,
like, no, it's cool to be even like the second in command. I don't have to be the founder now. And like it's all these things are, it depends,
yeah,
you know.
100%.
So yeah, definitely. And so maybe a question kind of relating to business. How do you
Yeah.
balance the, sometimes you get projects and like recruitment. So like, how do you balance getting new projects and then finding the right people? Or do you just solely depend on the people, the network you have of contractors to help you out?
So I don't have one network. I actually have a number of networks, and I balance fairly well because of that. I know within my network who's going to be good in web, who's going to be good in emerging technologies,
Hmm.
AR, machine learning, and so on, who's going to be good in bigger financial projects, and so on. And I sort of organize the company to cater to each client depending on that. Um, but truth be told, I'm not sure yet if that's a correct way of approaching, or maybe just building the team in a very niche way. Where so my niche is mobile, and I know I have
Hmm.
the best people for that, and that people are in London and so on. That's just not something that has always worked for me. Sort of like the build the team first and then go out and sell its
Hmm.
capabilities. I've always been, or the company I should say, always been very flexible in terms of what's out there, and I feel that's a huge advantage, as far as I, I understand it, because your typical project is never going to be the same. Your requirement of innovation is always going to be quite unique, and there's,
Hmm.
as far as I understand, there's no real way of building a team that can tackle all of the different cases. So we have clients that touch upon AR, some clients that touch upon computer vision and object recognition, and we have customers that for example, connect to smart devices like this bottle here, which has Bluetooth knowledge required. And I feel that the only way that we're able to serve um, that market, which is as a whole is a market of innovation, is by being very flexible in that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a ton of founders who have problems with this because some people say if you just focus rebrand as a mobile developer, then you have a bigger chance of getting searched by, and like it's much easier to pitch because you can imagine it. But then again, it's like technology changes, and I know like software companies who just say we're React Native developers. That's such a bad thing because first of all, it's owned by Facebook. They can just shut it down,
Mm.
and then it's like most people don't know what that is. Like most end clients don't know React Native.
Yeah,
Most startup
absolutely.
founders, they
So
don't care.
if a year ago you branded yourself as a company that only does VR, you'd have trouble today, because today VR is sort of going nowhere. It's not, nobody really knows where it's going, and it's not a really good user experience, and so on and so forth. And if you're that company that only does VR, then you're in a little bit of trouble. Or if you
Hmm.
bet it all on Magic Leap, and then Magic Leap sort of came up and turned
Yeah.
out that the mixed experience, the mixed reality experience is
Hmm.
not as straightforward as you would have thought, then again you're in trouble. Or
Yeah.
your example is great, actually. If you position yourself as, okay, so our team is React Native and this is what we do, Then Flutter comes along, and then you have 20,000 companies that do everything in
Hmm.
half the time that you did. So yeah, I don't know.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, right now we're doing mobile and then backend front end, and we kind of rebrand it to like fully product lifecycle agency where we can do everything for a company, whether they build MVPs or whether they are scaling and need just front end mobile apps, for example, because the CTO
Mhm.
is busy. If he gets Series C or B, they don't want to build apps if they're not like essential part of the business. So it's testing these value propositions and for different market segments and just being kind of more generic, I would say, but
Yeah.
still being kind of like product driven. And that kind of I think sets apart these agencies mostly because you can actually be kind of consultative in your
Yeah.
approach rather than just being one of a kind and just developer or this or this.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure enough. Hmm.
Yeah. So, what would you say, maybe from your experience, what's the biggest mistake when a first-time founder comes to you? They want to build a product. How do they go about their idea? Uh, what do you see as the biggest problem
The
from
one that
like the product building perspective, let's say?
Yeah, yeah. So I've seen it all. I've seen founders that want to that come to us after they did something with another team and they don't even own the project. Like for example, they don't have access to the repository of
Oh,
code,
okay.
and they just hired this company that they just told them to f off, and they just essentially don't have a way to recover the code or whatever. I've seen everything from that to the most moderate example, and this is the one that I think it's the biggest one, and it's founders that are very shy usually tend to rely a lot upon their suppliers, and your
Mm-hmm.
suppliers are only as good as you are. They cannot be better. So if you, for example, didn't think it was a priority to sketch out or scope out the UX of your project or how it should flow for the users, and you just gave it to a random programming agency and just told them, this is what I think, and these are a few examples that I think are relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Go see what you create, and they don't have anything in terms of reporting structure, or they're too shy to ask them to keep them updated, or even to ask what their processes are. They end up with a mess. If I had to consolidate it in one piece of advice, would be scope it first. Scope your project first. Make sure that you
Mm-hmm.
understand how it should flow from end to end, and of course that can change, but you need to have a good idea. Then design first. Don't even think about developing before
Yeah.
you've designed. And once you have design, then you go out and even start quoting for development, because once they have the design, then you avoid things like, oh, this thing was unexpected, or that thing is looking different than I envisioned, and so on and so forth. But once you have the design, it's much easier for any company to just say, here it is. Unless, of course, the company has a specialized design department. That's beyond the point.
No, I agree with that completely. Yeah.
Hmm.
So what's the vision for your agency? Because some companies, they just want to kind of grow into massive software houses, and some, we launched 3 of our own startups. They haven't reached the scale. They're not breaking even, but they are separate business units. So like, how do you plan to do that? Launch your own products or still do client work? How do you envision that?
That's a great question, and I'll go a little bit into my personal goal, and not the companies, because
Mm-hmm.
they're a bit separate,
Yeah.
really. And I never envisioned having the biggest programming agency in the world. That's not what I want to do, and I don't want to become one more programming agency that is doing X and Y.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, I see myself founding the right company or joining somebody else in that journey, um, and that's one of the reasons why my agency is being purposely kept small, and also because, well, most importantly, because I think that small is the new big. Small is flexible. Small is more powerful, especially in technology, but also because I see the vision for myself is more towards the founding, more than the founding, the solving of real problems,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is in business or in the world.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. So, do you have any favorite founder that you follow throughout your career?
Ah, yeah, it's a good question. You know what? I'm not that kind of guy that has um that 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 has, you know, that idol in the business world. I
Mm-hmm.
pretty much don't like any of them, to be quite honest. I have a thing about the way that Peter Thiel thinks.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of connect to the way that he thinks. And you know, I read his book. His book is very compelling. Is very good. But most of the people that I idolize and that I admire, and idolize is not really the correct word, are people outside of tech. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that includes even people that are very close to me, that are friends, that think in a very holistic way, that their mind ranges across subjects and they master those subjects in an amazing way. Also, people that have accomplished things that I want to accomplish and I haven't been able to, like multi-day walks or ultra marathonists,
Mm-hmm.
and people like that. And honestly speaking, I feel, and I might be absolutely wrong, that I have a lot more to learn from people um, across industries and across um, walks in life than the founders in my own industry at the moment. I really don't have a good answer for that.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Do you have any book recommendation, maybe
Oh,
for a startup or product building, or anything like that?
yeah, I have a ton. Um, Let me see. Range is amazing. It came out recently, and it's about, we all think that being specialized, and if we didn't start developing when we were 5, we're missing out. This book makes the case that that's not true. That generalists are actually much more powerful in generating change. I love that, and that book makes a really compelling case. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Born to Run, I already said it before. It's not really about entrepreneurship, but it's about something that really comes very much in tandem with my work, which is running. Um, and we had the best book that I read last year, I think, would be Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which is a negotiating book with a very different approach to negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very interesting. Very short read too.
Sounds good. I have to grab that. Do you have any apps on your phone that you use daily to make you more productive?
To make me more productive, let me check. So I use a lot, every one of the Apple apps, so the calendar
Mm-hmm.
and all of that, I obviously use a lot. To make me more productive, actually, one of the things that I considered would make me more productive is to actually not rely so much on the phone. So I'm trying not to. I'm actively trying
Mm-hmm.
not to use it as much. And in fact, being with my own thoughts um, is extremely productive, because creativity, according to a lot of thinkers, come from the from the resting phase of your brain, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're trying to organize ourselves so much on the phone, actually we don't give our head enough time to sort of spark that creativity and that eureka moments. um, so I don't know, that's not a direct question to answer to your question, but I
Oh, it's
really
fine.
wouldn't. Yeah, I use LinkedIn Learning a lot to continuously educate myself. It used to be
Mm-hmm.
lynda.com. I used to swear by that company. It's how I learned to program, actually. And LinkedIn Learning actually has a lot of good content, and I keep sort of upgrading my capabilities with that.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much for sharing all that, Jacobo. And where do you want people to go if some other founders are listening? They want to connect with you, find out more about your company. How can they find you online?
Yeah, the best way would be LinkedIn. If you connect with me directly, my name is a little bit hard to spell, but I'm sure you can put it on the
Mm-hmm.
description of the, yeah. And yeah, LinkedIn. Please, if we don't have any mutual connections or anything, just send me like a little note that you're coming from the podcast or anything, so that I'll accept the connection. Then binarymango.com is my company. You feel free to jump in and see a little bit of what we've done. There's a contact form as well. Feel free to reach out through there if you want to talk to the team, or yeah, I think yeah, LinkedIn would be the best.
Sounds good. So we'll definitely link the website and your profile. But thank you again for stopping by, sharing all that. And yeah, if everybody is interesting, go grab the show notes below this this podcast. But thank you again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. You too, and thank you for having me.
Bye bye.